evening, everybody. I'd like to call the Monday, November 15th, 6:30 p.m. public hearing to order in accordance with Chapter 20 of the Acts of 2021 signed by Governor Charles D. Baker, June 16, 2021, extending certain provisions of the Open Meeting Law, General Law, Chapter 30A and 20. A meeting of the Ordinance Committee of the Quincy City Council will be convening these public hearings via remote conferencing services on air on Quincy Access Television, channel QATV 9 Government Access. This public hearing is on Council Order 2021-080. It's an ordinance amending Chapter 375, zoning regulations of short-term residential rentals. At this point, I would like to ask anyone wishing to speak in favor or opposition to use their raise their hand feature or dial number 9 on your phone. And when you're called upon, please state your name and address. Looks like we have Citizen Rodefeld.
Just give me a moment to open him up.
Okay.
Am I open?
Yep.
Thank you, Jen. John Rodefeld, 62 Grand Wall Road. I was trying to give any other citizen an opportunity to raise their hand before me. I wish more people would speak up about things, but once a zoning change is made, it's pretty much final. They're not going to change it back. So I want to speak against this zoning change because right now I could see if we had a residential taxpayer exemption, which we don't. A residential taxpayer exemption would allow people who live in their own properties to basically make $2,000-$3,000 a year extra saving off their taxes, and everyone that has 2 families and 3 families and all these big apartment buildings who will be allowed to rent on Airbnb, they're the ones that are making the extra money. So the whole city is almost turning into a renter's city where the business in Quincy is no longer shopping in malls in Quincy Center. It's basically like a giant hotel where there's all these apartments where people are living. Now there's a lot of people who are working at their homes, and we have to basically allow people to use their homes, which are being assessed at over $500,000 in Quincy right now. At the current tax rate, your average taxpayer, they're paying about $500 a month in property taxes. They have to pay water, they have to pay sewer, they have to pay homeowners insurance. They have a lot of expenses. One of the ways that they can earn money is by renting out an apartment through Airbnb or other things that are on the internet that allow people from other parts of the country to come to Quincy. And it's kind of like a hotel all within the city. So we're discussing about making a hotel up Quincy Center where there's going to be people renting up there. And we just put a new hotel up in North Quincy. And I know a lot of these apartment buildings like the Ponset Landing and, these giant ones that they're building, they're all utilizing Airbnb. Sometimes 30 days at a time. They, might get a lower rate for a week, 2 weeks. So it's basically a short-term rental that is this cottage industry in Quincy. Now, to say people that live in residential A aren't allowed to participate is just not fair. They keep giving zoning variances of the planning board and the zoning board to developers that are taking advantage of the high rates that they're paying for the Airbnb. But it's not like there's bad people who use Airbnb. So Airbnb and the other online places, they police the people that use their stuff. So what we need stuff at the building department. We need rules for when people do Airbnb. We need registration lists. We need a process of how to keep track of who is doing Airbnb, who isn't doing Airbnb. What we don't need is a ban on residential A, because residential A touches residential B all over the place. It's such a spotty zoning that we have in the city. So it really makes no sense. So it's not fair to exclude the people that live in, there's senior citizens out there right now that need extra income, and to deny them the benefit to get extra income by renting out Airbnb and also meeting people. There's lonely people that they enjoy meeting people from this Airbnb. They enjoy being hosts. So Quincy is a host city. It's a very nice city. We want people to come and visit. We want to be nice. And I want Airbnb to be legal. Because I'm going to say this too. Let's say if you do pass this ordinance, it's almost impossible to enforce. How are we going to enforce it? How much money is it going to cost to enforce? We're going to have to, it really doesn't make any sense. So bottom line, I'll stop talking. I appreciate you letting me speak. And I'll let all the other citizens that want to speak after me. Thank you.
Thank you very much, John. Is there anybody else who would like to speak in opposition or in favor? If they could raise their hands or dial 9 on their phones. Okay. Just going to ask one more time. Anybody who would like to speak in favor or in opposition? All right. At this point, there's no written correspondence that have been received by the clerk of committees for this item. And I'm not seeing anybody else in the public that is looking to speak. So with no further public comment, I will go ahead and close this public hearing. It looks like it is 6:36. Okay. Bear with me. Lots of paper. All right. At this point, I'd like to call to order the Monday, November 15th, 6:35 meeting of the City Council Ordinance Committee to order in accordance with Chapter 20 of the Acts of 2021 signed by Governor Charles D. Baker, June 16th, 2021, extending certain provisions of the Open Meeting Law, General Law, Chapter 30A and 20. The Ordinance Committee of the City Quincy Council is meeting via remote conference services on air on Quincy Access Television, QATV, channel QATV 9, Government Access. Madam Clerk, could you please call the roll?
Councilor Andronico.
Present.
Councilor Kane.
Present.
Councilor DeBona. Councilor Harris.
Present.
Councilor Liang.
Present.
Councilor McCarthy.
Present.
Councilor Palmucci.
Present.
Councilor Phelan.
Present.
Chairman Mahoney.
Present.
8 members, you have a quorum.
Thank you much. I'm going to read in the open meeting language. Pursuant to the open meeting law, any person may make an audio or video recording of this public meeting or may transmit the meeting through any medium. Attendees are therefore advised that such recordings or transmissions are being made, whether perceived or unperceived, by those present and or deemed acknowledged and permissible. The matter before us this evening is Council Order 2021-080, ordinance amending Chapter 375 of the zoning regulations for short-term residential rentals. And I think we have Attorney Durkin on who's going to review what we're going over. And I think there might be an amendment to it. So, Attorney Durkin.
Thank you, Madam Chairperson, members of the committee. So as the council knows, the council already passed a short-term residential ordinance last year in 2020. And in the spring of this year, 2021, the mayor and councilors Phelan and Harris, I believe, have offered an additional measure to amend the city's zoning code. And this is so the first ordinance set up a regulatory process regulating short-term rentals, and it also set up a short-term residential rental registry. And so this additional measure, which is a very simple measure, Order 2021-080, it just amends the table of uses under the city zoning code and adds an additional category. And that additional category is short-term residential rentals. And that comes under single-family dwellings and two-family dwellings. And so this is an additional category. And what it does is it makes clear that the city council is prohibiting short-term residential rentals in Residence A districts. So that just further clarifies this issue. And having said that, what I would do at this point in committee is just to offer a further amendment of this ordinance. And that is, right now, what you have before you next to the category of short-term residential rentals, then you have each kind of zoning district next to that, beginning with Residence A and going on to Residence B, Residence C, Business A, Business B, Business C, and so on. Under Residence A, the designation is N, standing for prohibited. So that would be a prohibited use for short-term residential rentals in Residence A districts. The other ones, all of the other zoning districts before you have the designation of SP, standing for special permit. And that's actually not the designation that should be used. So in keeping and being consistent with what Quincy uses, we should have the designation BA, standing for Board of Appeals, instead of special permit. It goes to the Board of Appeals, but a special permit is granted. So I'm offering an amendment that under Residence B, Residence C, Business A, Business B, Business C, Industrial A, and Industrial B, instead of SP for special permit, the amendment should be a BA, standing for Board of Appeals. And that would make this amendment consistent with the designations we use in Quincy in the zoning code.
Thank you very much. So at this point, I'd like to open the discussion for our committee members to ask any questions that they may have. I don't think I'm seeing anybody, but if I'm missing anybody, you can wave to me. Oh, Brian Palmucci. Council Palmucci.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman.
that.
Attorney Durkin, so essentially what we're doing is allowing it only if there's an appeal to the Board of Appeals, like a special permit to the Board of Appeals?
No, what our regulatory process does, Counselor, is it puts the registration process, the permitting process, so to speak, in the hands of inspectional services. And as you know, Jay Duker is the zoning administrator. He's considered the zoning administrator for the city of Quincy. And so by putting it in the hands of inspectional services under the auspices of the director of inspectional services, we are essentially giving it to the zoning administrator, who is Jay Duker.
Right.
This is the best way we thought we could amend this table of uses, and amending the table of uses was the best way we thought that we would accomplish the end that we wanted here.
So what's the designation in Residence A in the table of use?
It just says N, meaning it's a prohibited use. Short-term residential would be a prohibited use.
Okay, and then across the board, it's what?
BA, Board of Appeals. In other words, it goes to the zoning administrator under our regulatory scheme.
That means the same thing, Board of Appeals. I mean, I understand the authority that we have. I was part of the council when we granted Mr. Duca when we vested in him the authority to act as a zoning administrator, which some people may not know. If somebody needs a variance, Mr. Duca very rarely, if ever, does it, but he can grant a variance on his own without the matter having to go before the Board of Appeals. I can understand why he doesn't, the political risk in that, but he could. So what you're saying in this instance is he would exercise that authority when it comes to short-term rentals.
Yes, he or his designee. So why not leave that in there as the same BA in residential A, just to make it more prohibitive?
Is that the thought?
Because the council has made it clear that one of its chief goals is to prohibit these short-term residential rentals in Residence A neighborhoods. So it really, if we want to accomplish what the council wants and what the mayor wants here, we don't want to leave this to anyone's discretion. That's why.
Sure. No, I understand. That makes sense. Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. That makes perfect sense. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I completely understand that. Under 40A though, under the Zoning Act, someone could still seek a use variance, correct? That would go to the Board of Appeals.
Yes,
Theoretically, they have that legal right, correct?
Yes.
Okay. All right. I mean, I still, for what it's worth, I still share the same concerns that I expressed when we voted on this last year. I voted against it. I just think in the time we're in, taking away the potential for someone to earn money with the rising costs of everything, rising taxes, cost of living for just about everything one needs, to take away a potential source of income for folks trying to stay in their home or make ends meet, I think is a difficult thing to do, especially when we don't know exactly how many people this affects. Steve, can you speak to the interactions with the Airbnb fella?
Sure. So I believe council may have received a copy of an email from Mr. Rothman from Airbnb, and that
was the first one. That was the first one, right?
That's the only one that I'm aware of.
Okay.
And I believe that arrived here the third week of October, and it was sent to the mayor and Jay Duca, I believe, and I received. It was forwarded over to me, and I was asked. Well, it was forwarded over to the law department, and I was asked to respond, which I did immediately. I responded on October 18th, I believe. And I responded by email. Essentially, after reviewing the letter and the concerns expressed by Mr. Rothman, I pointed out that the city council had already passed the regulatory short-term residential rental ordinance, which set up which did what it did. It set up a regulatory process, and then I made clear that the only thing now before the council was a very short proposed amendment to the zoning code, which consists of an amendment to the table of uses. And the provisions that Mr. Rothman expressed concern about were provisions that aren't before the council. And there were what I had done initially is I took the already passed ordinance, and I decided that we needed to, in addition, amend the zoning code. So I took an ordinance that was essentially mirrored what was already passed, and there were a couple of additions to that. And two of the additions that I had proposed in there had to do with data sharing and with having Airbnb assist us in enforcement measures. Now, I did that because the recurring theme I had with the council was councils wanted to know, where are these Airbnbs? Where are they? What wards are they in? What neighborhoods are they in? How many are there in Residence A neighborhoods, for example? And we weren't able to ascertain that information. And it's something we're still working on. But Mr. Rothman did point out that there are two federal laws that govern Airbnbs as digital platforms, sort of the way Facebook is governed by these federal laws. And so the two provisions that he pointed to may have been problematic and unenforceable, But as I explained to him, those aren't before the council. Those aren't being considered by the council. Those are not going to be part of anything adopted by the city or enacted as part of an ordinance. Apparently, he was satisfied with the response because it was almost 4 weeks ago, and I haven't heard anything from him additional to that.
Okay.
And I would point out, I did have, excuse me, Counselor, I did have a discussion with Jay Duca, and he brought me up to date on his efforts at enforcement of the existing ordinance. And he's indicated that they have the new software up and running, and it's a software program that uses algorithms to identify where short-term residential rentals are in the city. And having used that, his department has already sent out some 70-something letters to residential unit operators who they believe may be offering their units as short-term residential rentals. So he's getting that off the ground as far as enforcement is concerned. And that's without using any cooperation from Airbnb or any other platforms at this point.
Okay. So that email that you were on wasn't the first. That Rothman gentleman, he emailed the entire council at some point prior to September 22nd. And then I think it was another round of back and forth emails that you ended up getting looped in on. So two issues, right? First, Airbnb is the big player in the space. I think something like 50, 60% of all short-term rentals go through Airbnb. However, VBRO and I forget what the other one is. I think it's the one owned by TripAdvisor. But the other ones, they don't have nearly the capability for tracking and kind of nuisance management that Airbnb does. So I know Airbnb had offered to make available to the city, and I don't know if Mr. Duca has taken them up on it or if you have. They have 3 separate tools that municipalities can use. One is a neighborhood tool to see where the Airbnbs, this is just for Airbnbs, not for the other short-term rentals, but to see where the Airbnbs are, what the exact properties are. They have a law enforcement tool that if there's any legal incidents at any of these houses, law enforcement can get detailed information about the uses and who's been staying there, whatnot. And then there's a city portal that municipalities can use to help regulate, enforce regulations that they have. I think that there's certainly an opportunity for us to work with Airbnb here. I don't know about the other short-term rental companies, but I certainly think there's an opportunity. And you've made contact with Mr. Rathman. I hope that, or Rotman. I hope that Mr. Duca can make a use of the tools that they provide. And it's not their first rodeo. We're not the first municipality to talk about this. So they've taken some action. So I appreciate that. That fella also, I had a conversation with him. He's in Montreal, and he covers the entire East Coast. So it tells you a little bit about, I guess, how much value Airbnb sees in communicating with local municipalities. I got one guy who lives in Montreal covering the whole East Coast. But again, as it relates to voting on this measure in general, he shared with us, Mr. Rotman shared with us statistics from a recent survey of, again, this is just Airbnb, not all short-term rental properties, but just Airbnb in Massachusetts. The survey came up with the following information. It was 34% of hosts in Massachusetts only list their property when they're heading out of town. 49% use the income they generate from Airbnb to make ends meet. 66% say that the money they've earned from Airbnb has allowed them to stay in the home during difficult times. And then finally, 14% say the income from Airbnb has allowed them to stave off foreclosure. So again, I just want to say, without knowing which the properties are, without specifically mailing the people who are most impacted by this, I don't feel comfortable voting in support of the measure. And I fully commend Councilor Phelan and Councilor Harris for taking up the cause. It's I don't have the same issues that they have, where there's particular properties that are problematic. So I certainly don't speak negatively about them. I think they have to do what they need to do to protect the neighborhood, and I commend them for that. But for me, I'm just not comfortable at this point voting in favor of it. So I'll be voting no. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councilor Camucci. We have 5 minutes. I'm going to move this to Councilor Phelan, but we're just going to pay attention to the time because we have to open the meeting at 7 p.m. So, Councilor Phelan.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. This goes back to the reason we brought it in, was to protect the neighborhoods. And several complaints I got as a councilor, several groups coming in, buying up Residence A houses and single-family housing areas and using them commercially to rent. I'm sure some of the statistics that Councilor Palmucci just gave, but I just think if we're going to have single-family Residence A areas, we have to protect them. And I think this is the best way to protect them, because what's happening is we want to see families, we want to see people moving in there who are going to be part of the community. When these houses now become commercial entities, very rarely, the ones I run across, and there has been several of them, does the people who own them even live in Quincy? Some of them are, and that's why there's no ban, because in Boston, there was a ban and was struck down by the court. We're only looking to ban them in Residence A areas, which are set up to be single-family homes and neighborhoods. So we can either have the neighborhoods, have these great neighborhoods that are the backbone of our city, or we cannot have it, or we can just have the Wild West, and people come in and rent, and they rent out their house, and you don't know who the person is next to you, and get all the problems we have with that. We had problems in Ward 5 where people rented them to college students right in the middle of the pandemic. 125 people at a house party. Police had to come in and break it up. That was just one example. Another example is a police call on West Elm, where the street had to be completely closed down while the police cleaned out the street at 3 o'clock in the morning. And you're subjecting these neighbors to that. I would hope that I've heard there are lots of things that Jay Duca should, alleviate them. But the question we got here tonight is, do you want to preserve Residence A or do you not? And I think that by voting for this and putting this in, it helps to preserve Residence A. There's still other issues that are going to be attacking. Is this the golden bullet? No, because I spend most of my days on the phone with people coming in, buying these houses, setting them up as businesses, not setting them up as residential housing. And these streets are not made for it. I've got one Airbnb on one street, and I'm not trying to single out Airbnb. Verbo, there's a lot of them, but just lots of problems with it. It's been used for they have 3 different levels, and it's a single family home. Several cars are showing up. These streets are just not made to put adequate parking in. So for that reason, that's one of the reasons I brought it in back when I saw it. And I went back around door to door again this last time and had a chance to talk to a lot of people that are fully in agreement and want to see this happen. And I think it's also an affordable housing issue. They drive up the cost, go in, pay for things, drive up the cost of the housing. And, it's not, I don't want to ban them. I've used Airbnbs when I've been away, but they've always been where the person lived there, was very well regulated, and I found them very well. Unfortunately, some of the ones I found were not very well run. And I think we're following suit with a lot of other cities and towns that are doing the exact same thing. It's not only quality of life issue in the neighborhood, it's also an affordable housing issue. So, I'm fully in support of this. I would like to make a motion to pass this tonight. And I'm pretty much done now talking, but I'll turn it over to my other councilors. But I'm going to be voting in favor, and I would like to make a motion to approve.
Thank you very much, Councilor Phelan. We have a motion to approve. We're going to need a second for that, and then we're going to have to recess to open the meeting. Do we have a second to?
Second.
Okay, we have a second. So at this time, I'd like to recess this meeting so we can open the regular scheduled council meeting, and we'll come back to this. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. So we're going to go ahead and get right into the regularly scheduled council meeting starting at 7 p.m. Madam Clerk, could you call the roll, please?
Counselor Andronico,
Present.
Counselor Kane,
Present.
Counselor DeBona,
Present.
Counselor Harris,
Present, I think.
Counselor Mahoney,
Present.
Counselor McCarthy,
Present.
Counselor Palmucci,
Present.
Counselor Phelan,
Present.
President Liang,
Present.
9 members.
Thank you. If we could all just put ourselves on mute in honor of all the women and men serving both currently here and abroad. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Madam Clerk, could you read the open meeting law, please?
Pursuant to the open meeting law, any person may make an audio or video recording of this public meeting or may transmit the meeting through any medium. Attendees are therefore advised that such recordings or transmissions are being made whether perceived or unperceived by those present and are deemed acknowledged and permissible.
Thank you. And in accordance with Chapter 20 of the Acts of 2021, signed by Governor Charles D. Baker on June 16, 2021, extending certain provisions of the Open Meeting Law, General Law, Chapter 38, Section 20, the Quincy City Council will be convening via remote video conferencing services that will air on Quincy Access Television, QATV, channel QATV9 Government Access. I'm going to go ahead and recess the council meeting so we can go back into ordinance now. Thank you. Madam Chair?
Thank you very much. When we just recessed, we had a motion to approve, and Councilor Harris, if you would like to speak.
Yes, and I know it was seconded, and I hope my fellow councilors will take heed, and I'm going to tell the story again, but this is not. I'm sorry to disagree with you, Council Palmucci. In the most part, I don't think that this is about paying bills. I don't think it's a bad situation, especially in Resident A. If somebody owns a piece of property in Quincy right now in Resident A, that's a piece of property that's either been bought for profit to rent, and that's my opinion. Years ago, when I first was was in the council, and it took a long time for this monstrous house to be built on Orchard and on the water down by Orchard Beach. A real bad situation this is just one of many stories that I have. Residence B really needs to be, every neighborhood needs to be, as Councilor Phelan had mentioned, about the situation that he had. And it's right across through most of our neighborhoods. Jay Duca, it wasn't in the 70s, but Jay Duca told me that we had 90 letters sent out, 90, and it doesn't sound like a lot, but you divide it by, especially the oceanfront properties, 90 residents were sent letters. These are people that are dealing with Airbnb, and they're all about, and they're sending us letters, and I read it, they're all about making money. And the people, for instance, the situation I was talking about, I remember the zoning board, one of the gentlemen that owns this, who has been nothing but a nightmare to the neighbors of a Resident A area that pay mega millions in taxes. When you talk about when people say I knocked on door, I'm paying taxes, and I'm doing this, I'm doing that, guess what? Those folks in that area, their property values are over the top, and this gentleman, and they're paying for it, and they don't really mind paying for it because they have a nice area where they live. Not to say Res B and everybody else isn't, but the problem is that this gentleman came to the zoning board and said, this is one particular one, which is one of my major ones, said that he was putting it in for his parents and his family. They maybe have been there a couple of times, but they're not living there. This has been clearly, and this new system that Mr. Durkin mentioned, that speaking with Jay Duca, who was very good to come to a community meeting, Councilor Mahoney and Councilor President Liang was present. It was not good what was being told, and this one gentleman made it quite clear that this was this. Not only did he violate every day the rules we put in, everybody that's there is off-street parking. Nothing about it. It's pure Res A. Should not be there. There are people coming and going. Then he has this beachfront prop. He thinks he owns the beach. Granted, there's a certain amount of land, but he didn't even go to the conservation committee. He had his construction company put in spikes and roped off so he could put chairs from this monstrosity he built. And this gentleman still has on the side of his house, which is another violation of our city's ordinance, of his construction company. So when you think about what the people have had to deal with, and then when the building was being built, it was outrageous how he had thugs literally attacking friends of mine. Excuse me?
We don't be derogatory. Can we just keep it to that derogatory words aren't helpful? Thank you.
Thugs?
Yeah.
No, the guy threatened to hit one of my constituents, one of my friends, with a shovel, without a doubt. So if there's any other description of what that is, don't try to even Council Mahoney to put me in that other situation. Good for you. But that's not going to happen here. When somebody threatens one of my people, one of my friends, one of my constituents, I'm going to tell you, that's a thug when they're going to hit him with a shovel. And I'll bring those people to this council meeting next meeting.
Let's just keep it to what the motion is to
okay.
approve.
The motion is, and I make a motion to vote on this.
Thank you.
Again, yep. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much,
Council Mahoney. Thank you.
I do.
Good. Good for you, Council Mahoney.
Thank you. Does anybody else have any other discussions on that? And if not, we'd like to move this, if we could have a roll call for this. Thanks.
Counselor Andronico,
Yes.
Counselor Kane,
Yes.
Counselor DeBona,
Yes.
Counselor Harris,
Yes.
Counselor Liang,
Yes.
Counselor McCarthy, Counselor Palmucci,
No.
Counselor Phelan,
Yes.
Chairman Mahoney.
Yes.
I was a yes, Jen. Sorry, I was on mute.
I heard you through the wall.
Okay. At this point, it looks like we have everybody in favor of this. So what I'll be doing is we'll be moving this out during the later on in the evening's city council meeting. So I'd like to close the meeting. So I'd like motion to close the meeting at 7:09.
Madam Chairman, we're going to go ahead and reopen the regularly scheduled council meeting. So if we could, Madam Clerk, first item on the agenda.
Number 1 is 2021-109, a resolve resolution in support of Quincy Cable Access TV.
Thank you. I'd like to recognize Council Palmucci.
Sorry about that. I was just pulling up my agenda. I think it speaks for itself. If anybody else has anything to say about it, Quincy 2A TV is great. I think it's an important resource with the dwindling amount of people, the dwindling number of people cutting the cord, so to speak, and not paying for cable service. What this does is support legislation that would shift the funding of QATV over to internet. You know, there'd be monies that come from internet providers, not just cable providers. So I think it's worthy of our support, and I would move approval.
Thank you, Councillor. So I have a motion to approve. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Councillor McCarthy. I do see Councillor Phelan has his hand raised. Go ahead, Councillor Phelan.
Thank you, Madam President. I agree with Councilor Palmucci. I thank him for bringing this forward. I think clearly there is a shift from the regular old cable to more streaming and more internet services. I know at one point they started doing podcasts, but there was a point where they couldn't live stream because they weren't allowed through the cable. Recently, they've been able to start to live stream, and I think people are getting their information from a different way. So I think supporting these bills and continuing the work of Quincy Cable to bring the city council, all the different meetings to school committee, all of these to the people, I think is a great endeavor. I will be voting yes on this, and I thank Councilor Palmucci for bringing this forward. I think it's a very important issue to keep people informed of what's going on in city government. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Councillor Phelan. Councillor Andronico?
Thank you, President Liang. I just wanted to make a note that I will need to recuse myself from this vote, considering it identifies specific legislation, although my boss is a co-sponsor of it, as are Senator Keenan and I believe Representative Chan as well. I just wanted to make that note for the record. Thank you.
Noted. Thank you, Councillor. Any other questions or comments on this item before we move forward? Councillor DeBona and then Councillor Mahoney.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just to elaborate a little bit of what everybody's been talking about, as my fellow councillor, Councillor Kane, has brought in some new legislation to possibly get broadband here in Quincy. Right now, they're monopolized with Comcast's Infinity, where if you don't have that service, you almost couldn't watch this. So thanking QATV for the live streaming and allowing this to be on other services like Facebook or whatever social media sites, to get this on YouTube or whatever the case may be, so the folks at home don't have to be monopolized by Comcast Infinity getting that service where they could watch it in other areas. So a lot of folks are live streaming it right now and watching this live, which has been huge. And they've kicked the can with Comcast Infinity because the bills are astronomically high. So I'm happy to support this. I'm happy it came forward by Councilor Palmucci. We're looking forward to getting broadband here so we can obviously get other services. So thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Councilor Mahoney?
I just want to also thank Councilor Palmucci for bringing this forward. It's a really important, QATV offers so much more than most people realize. They were there for COVID. They were able to help people understand what was happening. They were able to disseminate information to the general public. And they are, with Comcast and the change of how people are now watching and streaming and getting their information. Their funding is as is all community access. Their funding is a sore point for them, and we need to find ways to be able to keep them there because they do offer a great service for our community as another social outlet for information that's being shared. These council meetings, school committee meetings, all generating different information that people can receive. But not only that, but they're also, the community access QATV have also just won third place for AM Quincy, first place for a radio show with ANC, and first place for overall excellence. So they're actually producing incredible, informative information for people. And it would be a dire response if we were not able to have that for our constituents here in Quincy. So thank you, Brian Palmucci, Councilor Palmucci, for bringing this forward. And I will be supporting this. And if there's any other issues that we need to bring up to make sure that this gets full support, even at the state level, then we should be doing that as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments on this item before we move forward with the vote? Okay, Zena, Madam Clerk, could you call the roll, please?
Councilor Andronico. Oh, Councilor Kane.
Yes.
Councilor DeBona.
Yes.
Councilor Harris.
Yes.
Councilor Mahoney.
Yes.
Councilor McCarthy.
Yes.
Councilor Palmucci.
Yes.
Councilor Phelan.
Yes.
President Liang,
Yes.
8 members.
Item passes. Quick shout out to Mark Crosby, who I know is also on background right now doing all of the stuff for streaming and it always keeps us on time when we go live. Mark, I know you're out there, so thank you so much for everything that you do as well. So that's it for the regularly scheduled agenda items on here for tonight. We don't have the approval of previous meeting minutes since we did have them back to back, so we'll have them the following meeting. So we're going to go ahead and move forward to communications and reports from the mayor, other city officers, and city boards. Madam Clerk?
Yes, I do have some traffic requests for this evening to refer to Ordinance Committee for advertising. Ward 1, Councilor McCarthy, add a 4-way stop sign to Melbourne Street and Babcock Street. Ward 2, Councilor Andronico, add no parking anytime on the south side and west side of Burns Ave from Charlemont Ave to Quincy Ave. Ward 3, Councilor Kane, add stop at Holbrook westbound at Amesbury Street. Ward 4, Council Palmucci, add 4-way stop sign to Fairchild Street at Bennington Street. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. We're going to go ahead and move on to unfinished business and preceding meeting. Okay, seeing none, reports of committees. Madam Chairwoman Mahoney.
Thank you very much. Earlier this evening, we did have an ordinance meeting and we had moved it out of ordinance for a positive recommendation. It was for 2021-080, ordinance amending chapter 375, zoning regulation on short-term rentals. I move to approve.
Thank you. So we have a motion to approve. Do we have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Councilor Phelan. Any questions or comments on this before we move forward? Okay, Madam Clerk, could you call the roll, please?
Councilor Andronico,
Yes.
Councilor Kane,
Yes.
Councilor DeBona,
Yes.
Councilor Harris,
Yes.
Councilor Mahoney,
Yes.
Councilor McCarthy,
Yes.
Councilor Palmucci,
No.
Councilor Phelan,
Yes.
President Liang,
Yes.
8 members.
Okay, item passes. Any other items in there, Madam Chairwoman?
No, that's it.
Okay.
That's it for this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so we're going to move on. Presentations of petitions, memorials, and remonstrance. Okay, seeing none.
I'd like to say something.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead,
Yeah.
Councilor Harris.
Yes, yesterday I had the pleasure, and it was a much better day yesterday when I was at the community meeting. We had much more pleasant gathering. I just want to congratulate Reverend Gray. Yesterday was Pastor Appreciation Day, and I also want to reach out to all the other pastors that are in our great city and thank them for all that they do. And then I'm actually going to speak to. I said something earlier this evening, and I used the word thug. And I want to make it quite clear that when a big man with a shovel goes and attacks somebody, that's a thug. Nothing to do with any other political or any other incidents. That's a thug, and I use that word. And I said it in the most best way I could. And I'm sorry that if anybody didn't like that. All I know is that the gentleman that was being attacked has been battling cancer and was just trying to question during the construction of this illegal Airbnb, who's been fined several times. So with that, I'm not going to say any more. I just want to say, I certainly, anybody wants to question my integrity, my passion for the job, the passion for the people that I represent. If there's any question, you know, go for it. But I'm going to be here for at least 2 more years, and I certainly will going to stand up for the people that I represent, and despite somebody trying to diminish what I was trying to say and interrupt me. So I'm looking forward to interrupting too. Thank you very much, folks.
Thank you, Council Harris. Any other presentations of petitions, memorials, or remonstrance? Okay, seeing none, moving on to motions, orders, and resolutions. Okay, seeing none, scheduling of committee meetings and public hearings. All right, as a reminder, our next meeting is going to be Monday, December 6th at 6:30 p.m. If anything gets scheduled, folks will definitely know beforehand. So with that, do we have a motion to adjourn?
Motion adjourned.
Thank you. Have a good night, everybody. Be safe.